Hello, everybody.
Hi there.
So we are back. We're doing our podcast here.
It's July 14th, and I just do want to take a moment to say Happy Bastille Day.
That's for all of our French and Parisian friends. The Day of Independence, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
The French Day of Independence.
French Day of Independence, yes. So, I have to admit that yesterday we did do a podcast that you may or may not hear. We started, and, quite honestly, when I got home, I had something in my mind about what we wanted to do, and then it just didn't materialize. So I think now this is the time. Did I say it?
This is the time. Take two.
So this is take two, and I really kind of had this thought in my head for a little bit of time about us being part of each other, and this is obviously, I don't think, a new concept.
No, and as a matter of fact, I think that at some point in the past year or year and a half that we've been doing our podcast, we've kind of touched on the idea of of understanding that we all are part of each other, and so therefore it's antithetical to consider the difference of us versus them.
I think that there's stages that we go through in our awakening and in our development.
Our evolution, for sure.
I think that there's this idea of, when you grow up and, you're trying to create your individual self, that is what is separate from your parents. But I do kind of believe in life's kind of wonderful, kind of bizarre way, you find yourself understanding that you are part of a greater thing. And I think that this is that phrase that comes, that people say of, it's not about me, and it's really not about our individual selves. I really do believe that it is about the collective that we create as individuals. So in some way, there is that individuality, but I think what I was thinking about, and this is, the topic of the conversation for today, is more about, if you think about the metaphor of rain and raindrops, and I don't know the scientific, all of that stuff. I mean, I learned it in grammar school, I think. But it is this idea that from one, there is many. And I think that's where I'm kind of coming from that idea that there is this one thing. And I think that we are like raindrops from one. And everything that we do affects everything else. So it is not as if whatever somebody's doing in Tennessee or Chicago or Boston does not have an effect. Eventually it does. And that's really what I believe. So I would ask Lex now to weigh in on that thought as I've expressed it just now.
Well, I think that it's a very interesting idea, and I believe a lot in the unity of us all. That said, it's kind of the tricky element is how important is our own individual selves and individuation, and I think that it is very important to acknowledge and to honor our individuality, and at the same time, and this is sort of that dichotomy or that duality of like, yes, we absolutely are very lovely, beautiful individual selves. That individuation, that individual growth and merit, and not to discount at all that we are part of the same self, and a lot of it is like, no, we are not entirely all one piece like the Borg. We're allowed to have our own individual selves and individual spirits.
This
and that
is where
lovely.
we may differ a little bit, because I do think that, yes, as we're represented here and this time, we are represented individually, but you cannot escape the fact that everything that we do as individuals has a ripple effect.
I agree.
And it has a domino effect. So it really, I think, gets you thinking about the idea of the whole. And, I think when we have these talks about the environment and things like this, it's like, it is not, so you can't have something that's happening in Flint, Michigan. That can't be an isolated incident with the water. Like, we would like to think that,
like, that's only happening
that's
to them.
only, yeah. But it's not only happening to them. And that,
it's a symptom of a larger situation, for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess somebody might say, okay, so what's your point? So my point is this. My point is that, and we just heard our dog weigh in.
Don't know if you guys can hear it. Maybe you can't, but she's talking up a storm. That's our Shanti Sage. Anyway, back to the
podcast. So anyway, the whole point. Okay, I think we're going to continue.
Chris is going to continue. I will be back in just seconds.
I'm going to continue. So I lost my complete train of thought, but I do believe what I was trying to say was that while we are not necessarily acting as a, one unit all the time, I do believe that there is a collective, and I do believe that within that collective, we have connections. And so what comes to mind to me most often is, and you who are listening might have the same phenomenon of when you're thinking about somebody or a particular time in your life, and then all of a sudden, it seems like out of the blue, that person contacts you, or you reach out to that person, and either that person contacts you and you've reached out to that person, and that person at that moment says or says that, hey, I was just thinking about you too, or they needed to hear from you at that time. So I think that there's a great value on really being in tune with that. And I think it kind of goes to my whole idea of the raindrop, in which, if we are all part of each other, and we share this experience, this experience we call the human experience, it makes perfect sense that we are in tune with each other, and that we know when we need each other, and that we reach out to each other when we need each other. And it hasn't failed me not one time. I can think of one time most recently when I reached out to a friend, and that friend definitely, it was welcome that I reached out to that friend. And I had dreams about this friend and had felt like I needed to say hello to this person. So I guess all that to say is, if you have those instincts and if you have that feeling, just do it. There's no cost, there's no harm to just picking up the phone or sending a text or, just connecting. And I think that's something that is quite honestly lacking right now.
Well, and I'm back now from taking care of our needy animal, but what comes to my mind as I'm just re-entering into this conversation is that those intuitions, those notions to reach out to others, i.e. different parts of ourselves, is really our spirit talking. It's the spirit world talking. It's the spirit world reminding us and nudging us to remember that we are all connected.
Yeah, and this might sound familiar because it kind of feels like maybe we kind of touched on this in another podcast, but I think now more than ever, it's important to understand that and to know that really the basis of everything that is good comes from love, I think, and that idea of taking care of each other.
Well, and the idea that we are much more alike than we are different. I think that that's really important to remember, is we have so many more things similar to each other than different from each other. And so to remember that.
So I think, I don't know if I fleshed out the raindrop idea, but basically the idea is that we are of each other. And the sooner we realize that, the better we're going to be.
Different parts, different shining facets, shining parts of the same. Yeah. I think that says it all, don't you, honey?
Well, it says it all for right now.
For right now, exactly. I'm sure there will be much more to say, and thoughts and input are always welcome, and we love reaching out to you.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Bye.